Materials include hot glue, paper, liquid glue, straws or runners, cardstock or poster paper, some ball bases, a metal surface, garden wire, floral wire, pen or marker, super glue, toothpick, and a cutter. For the first steps, I'm basically going to be referring back to my design sheet and trying to find a marble that is similar size to the shoulders. For the thigh joint, we're essentially going to be making the same thing, but we're going to be using larger bases. So this is the marble that I used for the shoulder joint, and I'm going to be using this for the thigh joint. It's a tiny bit bigger. Now, if I do find this one too big, I also have these Nerf balls that I can use as a base as well. It is slightly smaller than the marble, but I'll be trying to make thigh joints out of both and see which one works best. So I'm gonna be covering this marble over here with paper and glue, and then once that dries, I'm gonna cut it out, take the shell, and then build upon that for the shoulder. I got my marble and I got my glue. Now I'm just gonna paper mache the crap out of this. I'm gonna tear up a rectangle out of this that is slightly bigger and longer than my marble. So over here's a rectangle. I'm gonna wrap this up like it's candy. I'm gonna put some liquid glue in here, trying not to get any onto the marble. I'm gonna use my finger to get this stuff spread out. I'm gonna twist the ends. I'm gonna cut the ends off. There we go. I'm gonna roll around my palm like that. Get some more glue. Put a ring of glue around the hole that I made from cutting the edges. And then I'm going to slowly add bits of the strips of paper. I'm just gonna glue it onto that. It's not very visible. There we go. Roll it on my palms again. And I'm just gonna add a bit more just so it's a bit more rounder. So I'm going to let this dry, and then once that's dry, I'm gonna draw a line in the middle, and I'm gonna outline where I want to cut the shoulder because I don't want it to be equal semi-spheres because I want space in the middle for the middle part of the joint to go into. Did the same thing. I drew a line in the middle and then some lines beside it because I'm going to make it look like this, and this is about as thick as that. So yeah, this is going to make room for the middle piece. They'll connect the leg to the crotch area. Yeah, it's just a matter of peeling it off. There we go. We got 1/2 out. There's a tear here, but that's easily fixable. And I can just slide this one out as well. There you go. It's almost seamless. Now I'm just gonna go trim. Cutting on the line above the middle baseline, and there we go. I'm gonna do the same thing on this one. Alright, and there we go. We got 2 halves. Now, if you do get a tear like this, you can easily repair that with a bit of glue and a tiny scrap of paper. Just gonna get some glue over here. Tear up a piece of paper. I'm gonna take this glue, I'm gonna rub it on the inside, and then I'm just gonna do this. And I'm gonna put some on the other side as well to strengthen it some more. If you have this overlapping piece, just put a bit of glue in there and fold it, and then once it dries, you can just cut off the excess. But I'm a little impatient, so... And there we go. And these are gonna make up the sides of the main thigh joint, and we just have to make the middle piece now. Here's what the other ones look like once dried, and before cutting them, I'm gonna go cut them up now. Alright, so if you did everything, you should have 4 semispheres for the thighs and 4 semispheres for the shoulders. If you're making a human-like figure, of course. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a flexible metallic surface. Something like a metal ruler or those tin pencil cases would work. Then, I'm going to lay it flat down here, and I'm going to take a glue gun and fill each of them slowly.
For this one, you have to be careful because you wouldn't want to burn your fingers and get blisters, because that is not fun. So take your time, go around, make sure that is even as possible. And once you think you've filled it up all the way, push it flat down onto the metal surface that you have. If you do overfill it, some of the hot glue might spill out onto the sides. We can take care of that later on. Try and make sure it keeps its shape. And then just do that for the rest. All right, these should be dry now. Because this was on a ruler, I could just flex it a bit and then they should pop off a bit easier. This is not going according to plan. Whoops. And once there's a tiny wedge open, you can just take something sharp or something that can fit and pry it out. All right, and there we go. As you can see, it's a bit rough on the edges on some of them, but we can easily fix that with a pair of scissors because we can just cut around that. And then we get a cleaner shape. If any of the shells get damaged while you're prying it off, just put some glue and it should be good to go once it dries. Now, on the off chance you get some with air gaps like this one over here, take your glue gun, fill it back up a bit, and slowly level it off with the tip of the glue gun. If you want, you can even put it back on the metallic surface you chose and leave it there for a bit to flatten. Alright, now that we have the outer parts of our joints, all we need to do is to make the pins and the rings. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to be making these. Now these function the same. They allow rotation in the joint. I found two ways to make them. One is by using straws, and one is by using runners from used up model kits. Now, to prepare a straw, I'm just going to take a spare plastic straw and my glue gun, and I'm just going to fill this up. And it's kind of hard to see, but there's hot glue in there. That's up to here. Now I'm just going to leave this to dry for a couple of minutes. Now to get some runners for this joint, I just took this empty one and I got some cutting pliers. And I'm just gonna cut off pieces and segments of this. So I'll cut this like that. I'm going to trim off these excess parts. Then I'm going to take a cutter. I'm just going to smooth this out as much as I can. Just keep doing cleanup until it's as round as possible. Do be careful when you're doing this as well. All right, and now I have this. It is almost perfectly smooth, and the majority of this is going to be usable. When we use this, we want the rings to sit where it's smooth all around. So we would put it here or maybe here, but not here or here or here. Because even though we've smoothed this out to the best of our ability, it's still a bit rough and it could roughen up the paper and cause it to lose friction. All right, now the next proceeding steps are going to be the same regardless of which method you use. So I'm just going to use the runner as an example, but you can also do these steps with the straw.
So I'm going to find out how thin I want them. So around that thin, it's pretty close. So I want my strips of paper to be this thin. I'm gonna go ahead and cut those now and start cutting the actual strips. Alright, here's some strips of paper that I've cut out. You check it. It's good enough. I can always cut it out later. I'm gonna go take a runner. I'm gonna whittle a bit off of the edge of one side. On this whittled edge, I'm going to start rolling up this strip of paper. I'm gonna try and hold it down as tightly as possible. Now I'm just gonna take some super glue, a good amount there, and then I'm gonna use a toothpick to spread it out like that, and I'm gonna start rolling it. Keep adjusting it just to make sure it doesn't get stuck. I'm just going to leave this here because I don't want it to be too thick. So I'm going to cut the rest off. Checking the tightness again. If you feel it's a bit loose, you can add a bit of super glue on the inside using a toothpick or a wire. I'm just gonna do that. Then I'm gonna leave that to dry for a bit. And this white part is gonna be part of this middle part over here. That's what's gonna allow it to raise like this. Now, we're going to be making this inner part of the joint. This is what's going to attach the joint we're working on to the joint that we want to attach it to. Think of it articulation. First, we're going to get some
thin, hard material. I'm going to be using poster board, but you can probably get away with using cardstock. I'm going to be taking the joint that we're working on, for example, the shoulder joint. I'm going to lay the flat side flat on the material we're going to be using, and I'm going to trace around it. Now we have the base for the inner part. There's two ways to go about this. You can either keep this size or make it slightly smaller, just so you can have a shoulder joint where most of it is hidden. Because in reality, if we're making something like a shoulder or a thigh, we're only going to be utilizing a quarter of the range of motion. So we can cover up the rest over here if that's what you wanted. But that'll take a lot more time and effort, so I'm just going to be sticking with the regular sized one. All right, now we're going to want to mark the middle of this. Now you can either estimate where the middle would be or do some measurements to find it. I'm just going to eyeball it myself. Then, once you find the middle, you're gonna cut a hole in the middle that is a tiny bit larger than the pin you're using. Personally, what I like to do is I just like to cut 6 lines across the middle, and then I'm just going to push this through and try to keep it centered. There we go. Now that I have the hole ready, I'm going to put a tiny bit of super glue around the hole. I want to avoid getting any in contact with the hole and with the pin. I'm just going to put them slightly outwards more. Then I'm going to slide the pin with the ring inside gently and carefully, and then I'm going to use a spare wire, but you can also use a toothpick to guide the super glue onto the ring. And then you can go ahead and leave that to dry for a couple of minutes. While it's drying, make sure to spin it around a bit to make sure that the hot glue doesn't stick this part and the pin together, because if it does, then there's a chance you might have to restart the process again. Then, once you're done, just cut out the triangle pieces that are over here, but I forgot to film that, so we're going to be moving on. You're going to want to trim this piece to be the same size as your attachment point. So for this one, I'm going to be using this as my attachment point, and it's around the same size. If it's slightly taller, just trim it a bit. If it's shorter, then I suggest remaking this ring part. Once you have that done, however, you can go ahead and cut a strip of cardstock or poster paper that is going to be the same height as this, and that's going to go around and be our outer shell. You're going to take your attachment point, so in my case it's this runner, then you're going to carve out a slight curve inwards, because we want it to sit here properly and not be sitting out like that. It's hard to see, but it's more of a C shape. Now I'm just gonna cut some notches in here just so the hot glue has something to stick onto. So I'm just going to make something like that. Then I'm going to take my hot glue, put a bit over here. Then I'm going to put the attachment point down, making sure that the C shape is pressed into the ring. Then I'm just going to secure that a bit more with some hot glue as well. And I'm going to leave that to dry for a bit. Now, I'm going to cut a curved shape going inwards in this strip of poster paper. Then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it around this, with this curved part touching this runner. So I'm going to slowly and carefully put some glue in here. I'm not gonna do it all the way. I'm going to start doing this. Just do that slowly. And we want to try making sure that it keeps its shape. Then once we're getting to the end, just going to cut this out again, and then I'm going to cut out another curve going inwards while trying to estimate where this is going to end up. So it should look like that. Now I'm just going to finish this off. All right, here we go. Now it's slightly more even, more rounder. I'm going to start slowly filling this up with hot glue until it's level over here. Just filling it up bit by bit. Once again, I'm going to use this ruler to have a level base. I'm just going to lay it down like that. Then I'm going to leave that to dry. All right, now this is what I have. And all that's left to do is to combine these 3 pieces into one. I'm going to start by using a marker and eyeballing where the middle would be. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna go ahead and use a cutter to cut a hole on the side with the paper. Now this hole is here because we're going to be using the hot glue gun to make a hole in here, and we want some place for the hot glue to come out of, because otherwise it's just going to overflow this entire area and mess up this smooth surface that we have. I'm going to take the pin that I'm going to use and I'm going to cut notches on one end of it. Then I'm going to carefully melt the middle. I'm also going to periodically wipe away any of the excess hot glue because I'm still trying to keep this as flat as possible. Then I'm going to put some hot glue inside and put in the pin with a notched end into the middle. Then I'm going to spin it around, making sure that it's equal all around. And then if there's any gaps in the middle because of the hot glue nozzle, I'm going to fill that back up with a glue gun. I'm going to do it carefully though because I don't want it to overflow. Then I'm going to use this ruler again to flatten everything out. If you do get some excess hot glue that you can't remove, just use a cutter to carefully cut it off. Now, this is very important that you remember this part. Before you put on the middle piece, leave this to dry for like an hour just to make sure it's strong enough to handle all the twisting. Because if you start twisting it right now, there's a really high chance that this will start to come undone and you wouldn't want that happening. Now, this is what I have so far. And if you want to see in action, there you go. All that's left to do is to cut a hole into the other side and just slide it in and cut the tip off. Now, if you had a hand drill or some form of drill, it would probably be easier if you just drill a tiny hole here. If you don't, the hot glue method should work decently well. It'll just be harder to clear out the inside area. But luckily for me, I'm going to use a secret technique. It's called a Dremel. Alright, and should be something like that with a bit of an excess over here. I already cut the notches on the pin on this side, so I'm just going to put the hot glue in here, and that should mean that pushing this pin through here would push the hot glue out while keeping some stuck to seal the pin into the half sphere. I burnt myself with the glue gun again. Now, if you hold this in place, this is how it should work. There we go. If you can't see the difference, I'm going to draw a line here, straight across all three, and you're going to see the middle part shift. There we go. I'm just gonna snip this protruding part off, clean it up a bit, and there you go. That's how I make my shoulder joints. All that's left to do is to attach the arm or whatever you want to attach here. Now again, the thigh joint functions identically to this. You should be able to use the steps for this over to this one as well. All right, one last adjustment I'm going to make to the shoulders before I attach to the limb. I'm going to flatten the sides a bit. So I'm just going to make it less round pretty much. There we go. When it comes to attaching part of the arm to the shoulder, I usually do it by making two round cylinders. Basically, this is a shoulder joint. I'm going to be making something that sits onto the shoulder like this. As you can see, there's a slight curve here that will help maintain stability for when you're posing the shoulder. It's hard to tell, but I had to mark the edges of the shoulder strip, but these are two different sizes. That's gonna give it a slight curve just so the ball joint sits more securely onto the arm. I'm just going to take a cylindrical object like this wooden dowel that is around the same size as the arm that I want to make. Then I'm just going to roll both strips into cylinders. I want the smaller one to go on the inside. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it to where the paper meets the paper and make sure that there's no overlapping. So I'm going to mark this right here. As you can see, that's pretty much where it is. No overlapping parts, no gaps. I'm going to do the same thing with this other slightly longer piece. I'm going to start by gluing it somewhere here, while making sure one of the edges of the longer strip touches the edge of the shorter strip. It should look like that. I'm going to put a bit of glue here, put this right here. I'm going to put it back in the dowel, and then I'm going to glue around until this longer strip of paper meets itself again, and that's where I'll cut it. I'm going to hold it down as tightly as possible. Here it is now, so I'll mark where that meets itself. There we go, and I'll glue the rest on. As you can see on the inside, that step over there, it's where we're going to put our hot glue, and it should attach securely to the shoulder joint. Now, before attaching this, I'm going to mark out areas not to put glue in, mainly this right here, because we don't want this middle part to get stuck onto the arm. On the other side as well. Now I'm just going to put the hot glue in.
Then, while it's still hot, I'm going to carefully put this right here. There we go. Now you can leave this to dry for like 10 minutes. And if you did everything right, it should be solid and you should be able to rotate it and play around with it. Now, here's the joint after drying. There we go.
For the ankle, we're pretty much going to be making a joint like this right here. This joint consists of two pieces that split apart just like that. So over here we have the pin, and then we have the ring over here, which is more of a hexagon shape. And this will pretty much just slot into that. And that's how it'll work. So this is what it's going to look like on its natural position. So it should give us a swivel this way, up and down movement this way, and a pivot if we look at it from the front. For this one, I'm going to take some craft beads. These are two different sizes because I've never done this before. So I want to see which size will work perfectly. But I'm going to do same steps that I did to make the shoulder and thigh joints, but there'll be one less part and they'll be full half spheres instead of being reduced by a bit. I'm going to take a strip of paper and cover the craft bead with it. Glue it together. Gonna wrap it up like it's candy. Gonna cut off the ends, seal the open parts with more strips of paper and some glue. And once this is dry, I'm gonna divide it in half and cut it in half evenly. When you line these up, you want to make sure that they're even because it's going to be hard to make a proper functioning joint this small if both sides are noticeably uneven. They're all lined up and ready for cutting. So I'm just gonna... Alright, and here we go. Perfectly cracked eggshells. So now you're also going to need to make some pins and rings, and I went ahead and did that off camera as well. I'm going to take 1/2 of the ankle joint, and then a ring. And I'm just going to go and glue this into place, but before I do that, I'm going to put this in here just so I have something to hold this with as I glue this into place like that. I'm going to avoid putting hot glue directly in the middle. I want it to go around, then I'm going to gently move this. I'll scooch out the hot glue if I need to, and then I'll let that sit into place like that. If you ever get some with a slight excess, like you can see on this one where the ring slightly goes up further than the half shell, take a knife and then just gently get rid of that piece. There, as you can see, everything lines up much better. Okay, I went ahead and cut off a piece of a runner. I'm gonna cut some notches on the end. Just put some hot glue around this end piece right here. Stick that onto the other shell that we have. It's gonna center it. I'm gonna rotate the whole thing to make sure everything is equal as it dries. Once it's dry, I'm just going to take it out and start to slowly fill this with hot glue. Because if we fill this up way too fast, it's going to melt the hot glue in the base and then it's going to offset this. Since this ruler has a hole, I'm going to use that for this and just put this through here just to leave it to dry for a bit. Now I filled up the other end, and as you can see, a bit of the hot glue is protruding out. Going to shave that off real quick. Now you want to make sure you're doing this gently because you don't want to be cutting too much into the runner. There we go. Now to make the attachment points they'll connect the ankle joint to the foot and to the shin, I'm going to take a larger piece of runner and I'm just gonna cut it up just so it sits right in the middle of the ankle joint. I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 pieces from this. For both of them, I'm going to carve it out a bit just so half of it would be empty and the other half would go into the half circle, because we want to make something like this. As you can see on the pin that will go into the other parts of the limbs, only half of it is connected onto the half circle. So we're going to be trying to replicate that. So I'm just going to cut a little bit here so it reaches about halfway. Then I'm just going to start cutting it off bit by bit. Okay, so something like this would probably work. Now what I'm going to do is going to cut a little spot for this to go into right over here. And if you do it properly, this is what it should look like. Now we're going to go ahead and do that onto this other joint as well, and I'll come back once that's all done. And here's what I have. Now, unfortunately, it looks like I didn't cut in half properly, so it looks sort of uneven. But this is also my first time making this joint, so that's my excuse. But yeah, as you can see, it works like that. I also super glued some pieces of paper onto this attachment point just so it is more stable and secure. And yeah, it does come off like that to 2 pieces. And as you can see, it functions similarly to this one right here. And also to this shoulder right here. So if you wanted, this could also substitute as a shoulder joint for smaller figures. So I'm going to do something I've never done before. Try to make thigh joints with ball joints. The idea is we're going to have 3 ball joints, 1 on each thigh and 1 for the lower chest. And then we're going to have a Y-shaped piece that's connecting all 3 in the middle. So an example of a figure that uses that type of joint is this Wind Toys figure. If we pop off his legs, you can see that right there. Ball joint connected to a Y-shaped piece that connects to the stomach and the other thigh. I've got some garden wire, some floral wire. I'm going to take some pliers and I'm going to make a shape out of it. This Y shape, I'm going to fold that here. It's going to be up to there. Fold this right here. Trying to move it upwards and downwards is actually giving some good results, but if I do it this way, yeah, it would bend if I move it forwards or backwards. So, alright, before wrapping it up, I decided to make another copy of it so that it is twice as strong because this garden wire is actually pretty tough. Now I'm going to take some floral wire, I'm going to wrap it around this. I'm going to be starting on this top piece over here because it has 2 loops. I'm going to loop this end piece. Bit and start wrapping the rest up. But before I do that though, I'm going to leave a clump of loose wire here just so the hot glue has something to attach to. That should be enough. Tightly go around the rest of this shape. Going to do that same thing, have a bunch of loose wires going around and wrapping around it like this. I'm going to do this other side. And then I'm just going to reinforce the middle. Cut this up, and I'm just going to insert this loose piece inside. There we go. I can't move it by hand. Should be good enough. This is what it looks like. I'm just going to build some ball joints on each end, and I'll come back when that's all done. Here's me trying to put some hot glue on. So far, it's looking good. If you remember the loose wires that I left here, I'm using that just so the hot glue has something to catch onto. And I'm building the ball joints off of that. Okay, and in the end, this is what I have. We have the 3 ball joints over here. Then here we have the 3 sockets. These just pop in like that. And they have your standard ball joint range. Pretty solid as well. If you wanted to make this joint instead of the other one, then here's how you do it. Some of you might be curious, Ian, if you haven't tested this ball joint yet, how do you know it's gonna work? Well, I just tested it. Here you go. I attached one of the legs that I previously worked on, and here's me twisting it upward. There you go. Barely swinging down, and as you can see, it can still freely rotate like that. It can go sideways that far, and this is what it looks like from the side. And you can just pop it off as well because it is a ball joint. Pop it back on like that, and yeah, fairly solid. There you go. That should be the end of the joint tutorial series. I hope some of you have found this useful and hope that this will get some of you to start making figures on your own. I'm going to make a video compiling all the entries in this joint tutorial series, and then hopefully I can get back into working on the figure.